I should have known something was off the moment I heard him laugh. It wasn't his usual laugh, not the warm, chest-deep one from our early years. This one was lighter, almost dismissive, the kind of laugh you use when you're trying to look good in front of people who matter more than the person standing beside you. "Come on, Elena doesn't really work," my husband, Mark, said, waving his hand in a lazy half-circle toward me. "She plays with little data projects from home. Keeps her busy while I'm buried in the real deadlines." The group chuckled, polite and shallow, clinking glasses in that fake corporate way. The words hit harder than he seemed to realize. Or maybe he did realize, and said them anyway. I smiled because that's what you do when you're standing in the courtyard of your husband's consulting firm, surrounded by executives in tailored suits and spouses wearing designer flats. But inside, something slid sideways, like a picture frame knocked out of alignment. My little data projects had quietly saved a small healthcare nonprofit nearly $9 million last year when I uncovered a pattern of fraudulent billing in their contractor accounts. My audit was later cited in 2 industry newsletters. But to Mark, it was just me tinkering. The CFO's wife, a woman with pearl earrings and a well-rehearsed smile, leaned in with sympathetic curiosity. "That must be nice. Having time for hobbies." The word hobby stung like lemon in a paper cut. "I actually do financial analytics," I started. "Oh, of course," she interrupted with a gracious smile, the kind people use when they're pretending to encourage you while silently patting you on the head. "It's wonderful when women find something meaningful to pass the time." Pass the time. I took a slow sip of wine. Not because I needed it, but because it gave me a second to swallow the response I really wanted to give, that my analyses had prevented 2 investment groups from sinking millions into bad deals, that my inbox still held messages from managers thanking me for catching what their teams missed. But I'd learned long ago that some people only hear what fits the story they've already written. I excused myself to grab fresh air, even though we were outside. I walked toward the edge of the courtyard where fairy lights twisted around maple trees, breathing in the scent of grilled salmon and evening drizzle. I was staring at the fountain when Mark appeared beside me, balancing a second glass of champagne. "You disappeared," he said, handing it to me. "Everything okay?" "I didn't know I was suddenly unemployed," I said lightly. He blinked. "What?" "The way you just described my work. Like it's nothing." Mark sighed in a way that told me he was already annoyed. It was a joke. Don't be sensitive. Everyone here knows what I do. They don't need complicated explanations." "Complicated explanations?" My voice stayed calm, but every word had an edge. "Like the difference between predictive modeling and basic budget spreadsheets?" "Elena," he said, lowering his voice, "this is a professional environment. Can you not make this into a thing?" A thing. I'd been together with this man for 11 years. I knew that tone. It meant, don't embarrass me. Strangely, that thought didn't hurt, not the way it would have 6 months ago. Instead, it settled into my chest with a cool, quiet clarity. He wasn't worried about me. He was worried about optics. The realization pressed down on me like a weighted blanket, slowly, steadily, inescapably. I looked at him carefully, searching his face for some hint of the man who used to stay up all night helping me test algorithms when I first started freelancing. The man who used to brag to friends that I was the smartest person in the room. But all I saw was someone who wanted me small enough to fit into the version of life he'd built for himself. "I didn't realize my career was embarrassing to you," I said softly. He ran a frustrated hand through his hair. "It's not embarrassing, Elle. It's just, niche. People here won't understand it." I simplified. Simplified. Right. I let my gaze drift back toward the crowd, the CFO gesturing with wide arms, interns nodding eagerly, partners laughing too loudly. It was a familiar scene. I'd spent years orbiting these people at conferences, fundraisers, holiday parties. But tonight, it all felt strangely distant. Like I was watching through glass. I finished the champagne and handed him the glass. "I'm going home." "Elle, come on. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not," I said with a small, practiced smile. "I'm tired." And I was. But not in the way he thought. As I walked through the courtyard gates, my mind wasn't replaying the insult, it was replaying the pattern. The slow drift of comments over the past months. The subtle minimizing. The way he'd begun making decisions without asking for my input. How he'd stopped sharing his work challenges with me but spent an hour each night texting his new senior manager, Taylor, about strategy questions. I'd told myself it was harmless. Tonight made me wonder if it was something else. I didn't look back at Mark. I didn't need to. I could picture his expression perfectly, exasperated, confused, and most importantly, unbothered. But as I reached my car, I realized something unsettling. This wasn't the beginning of a problem. It was the first time I'd finally admitted one existed. The next morning, Mark acted like nothing had happened. He kissed my forehead on his way out, coffee in one hand, phone in the other, already half absorbed in email. "Don't forget we've got the client dinner on Thursday," he said. "Partners and senior staff only, but spouses are invited this time. You'll come, right?" There was a time when I would have said yes without thinking. Now, the word got stuck behind all the things I hadn't said last night. "I'll see how my schedule looks," I replied. He paused, his hand on the doorknob. "You're not busy with anything urgent this week, right?" It was the way he said it. Not rude, not aggressive, just dismissive. Like my work was flexible background noise around his real life. "I have deadlines," I said. "Believe it or not." He let out a short, strained laugh. "Relax, Elle. I'm just asking." The door closed. My laptop waited on the kitchen table, surrounded by a mess of printed reports. I sat down, opened the file I'd been working on, and tried to shift my brain back to numbers. It usually worked. Data was simple, clean, honest. Patterns didn't lie to make themselves more comfortable. People did. By noon I was deep into a dataset from a regional logistics company I'd been hired to analyze. A subtle inconsistency in their reported fuel expenses caught my eye. The variance wasn't huge, but it repeated in a way that didn't line up with their shipping volume. I highlighted a section of the spreadsheet and added it to my notes. I should have felt that familiar small thrill of discovery. Instead, I kept hearing Mark's voice from last night. "She plays with little data projects from home." I pushed my chair back and stood up, pacing the length of the kitchen. Our apartment suddenly felt smaller, like the walls had shifted in overnight. On the counter, a framed photo of us from 5 years ago caught my attention, both of us on a beach, hair windblown, sunburned, laughing at something that, back then, seemed so important. We'd been equals that day. At least, that's how I'd remembered it. My phone buzzed against the table. A text from my friend Mia. "Mia, you alive? How was the big corporate circus last night?" I stared at the message for a few seconds, then typed back. "Me, he made a joke about me not really working in front of his partners." "Mia, you're kidding." "Me, wish I was." "Mia, did you call him out?" "Me, not there. Not in front of them." "Mia, Elena." The little typing bubble appeared, disappeared, then came back. "Mia, this isn't new. It's just the first time he said it loud enough for other people to hear." I sank into the chair, that sentence landing heavier than I wanted to admit. Because she was right. The signs had been there. They were just quieter. Like the way he'd stopped asking how my projects were going, and when I told him anyway, his response was always the same, "That's nice." Not interesting, not impressive. Just nice. Like a child's drawing you taped to the fridge. Or the way he'd started saying things like, "You don't know how intense it is at my level." When I questioned his company's long-term strategy over dinner, my stomach tightened. And then there was Taylor. I'd never met her. I didn't need to. I knew her name better than some of our neighbors. "Taylor thinks we're moving into a whole new space next quarter. Taylor says this client is going to make or break our numbers." Taylor's perspective changed how I think about leadership. At first, I'd been genuinely happy for him. A good mentor can change your career. Somewhere along the way, though, her opinions had started replacing mine. My phone buzzed again, pulling me out of the spiral. This time, it was Mark. "Mark, quick thing, could you not bring up last night's joke again? It really wasn't a big deal. I've got enough stress with year-end numbers." I stared at the text. Not, "I'm sorry." Not, "I didn't realize it hurt you." Just, "Don't make this harder for me." I set the phone down without replying. Thursday came faster than I expected. The restaurant was one of those downtown places with exposed brick, pendant lights, and waiters who recited the menu like poetry. Mark wore the navy suit he saved for client events. I wore a simple black dress and a blazer, something that made me feel like myself, not an accessory. "Remember," Mark said as we walked in, "these guys are old school. They don't get all the tech and data talk. Just, keep it light." "I'll try to restrain my dangerous knowledge of regression analysis," I said dryly. He didn't laugh. The hosting manager led us to a long table near the back, already crowded with animated conversations. Mark's team was there, plus a few clients and spouses. A woman at the far end of the table caught my eye immediately. Tailored gray dress, subtle gold jewelry, confident posture, sharp haircut. I didn't need an introduction to know who she was. "Elena," Mark said, placing a hand on my back in a way that felt too intentional. "This is Taylor Collins, our senior manager." "Taylor, this is my wife." So this was the woman whose name had been living rent-free in my house for 6 months. Finally, Taylor said with a bright smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, I've heard so much about you. I've heard a lot about you too, I replied. That, at least, was completely true. She laughed lightly. All good things, I hope. That depended on your definition of good. As people shuffled for drinks and menus, Taylor leaned closer, lowering her voice to something confidential. Mark says you do analytics. I do, I said. Independent consulting. Mostly financial and operational data. Oh, that's adorable, she said, her tone warm but slightly off. It's nice you have something flexible to do from home. Mark's always said it gives you a lot of free time. Adorable. Flexible. Free time. I felt my jaw tighten. It's less about free time, I said evenly, and more about catching things before they bring organizations down. Her smile flickered, just for a second. Then it was back. Of course. Every little contribution counts. Little contribution. The urge to remind her that my so-called little contributions had kept organizations out of trouble they didn't even know they were in was strong. Instead, I took a sip of water and let the silence stretch just half a beat too long. Across the table, Mark was laughing at something one of the partners said. When his eyes met mine, there was no question there. No check-in. Just a quick glance, then back to his conversation. My chest tightened. Not from jealousy, that would have been simpler. This was something heavier. Something closer to grief. Taylor turned her attention back to Mark, sliding easily into the empty chair beside him. As the appetizers arrived, I realized something quietly brutal. I didn't recognize my own place in this room anymore. I watched him talk about projections and pipelines, about the pressure at this tier and navigating expectations. He looked alive, engaged, sharp. He hadn't looked at me that way in a long time. Halfway through the main course, one of the partners asked, "So, Elena, what do you do with your time while Mark's saving the world for our clients?" The table laughed. Mark opened his mouth, ready with some easy answer, the same kind as last weekend. This time, I didn't let him speak. I didn't cause a scene at that dinner. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't clap back at Mark or Taylor or the partner who'd asked about what I do with my time. But something in me shifted, subtly, quietly, like a door beginning to close. I answered the question with a level, measured calm. I work with organizations on identifying financial and operational risks. The kind that don't show up in marketing decks or employee briefings. The kind that save people's jobs when caught early. The partner blinked, surprised. Taylor's eyebrow twitched. Mark gave a nervous smile, the kind that said, "Please don't make this awkward." I didn't say another word for the rest of the dinner unless someone directly asked me something. And even then my answers were quick, contained, polite. No one noticed the change. Or if they did, they pretended not to. But I noticed. And that was enough. The next morning was strangely quiet. Mark left early for a meeting. The apartment felt hollow, like its walls were waiting for something. I opened my laptop and tried to dive into the logistics analysis again, but I couldn't concentrate. Numbers that usually formed neat, logical patterns were muddled, stubborn. My thoughts kept drifting back to details from the night before. Not the big moments. The small ones. The way Taylor slid into the seat between Mark and the partner before I could sit down. How she touched Mark's arm when she talked about their client pipeline, a casual, light brush of fingertips, not inappropriate, but familiar. How easily Mark leaned toward her whenever she spoke, shoulder angled, attention sharp. How he didn't notice whether I'd finished my meal, whether I was quiet, whether I existed. By noon, I had reread the same spreadsheet cell 12 times. I shut my laptop. I wasn't angry. Not yet. It was more like unease. A feeling you can't trace to one incident because it isn't one incident, it's the accumulation of 100 small ones. The tension wasn't explosive. It was creeping. Slow. Ambient. The kind that makes you realize things don't break suddenly. They wear down long before they actually crack. That afternoon, I got coffee with Mia. We met at a small corner cafe with floor-to-ceiling windows and the hum of espresso machines in the background. Mia was the no-nonsense type, a software engineer with the emotional radar of a missile. She took one look at me and frowned. "Okay," she said, sitting down. "Tell me everything." I told her about the dinner, the comments, the tiny interactions that felt like pinpricks. And how Mark had been drifting, inch by inch, towards someone who talked like his thoughts were the only ones in the room. She listened without interrupting. When I finally stopped, she leaned back in her seat. "Elle," she said slowly, "this isn't about Taylor." I rubbed my temples. "Then what is it?" "It's about Mark outgrowing the version of himself who saw you as an equal, and not knowing how to integrate the new version with the woman who helped him get there." I stared at her. That hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. She went on. "People change when their environment changes. You stayed grounded. He started climbing. And somewhere along the way, he decided he needed to appear like the main character, which means someone else has to play a quieter role. And that someone is me, I said. Her expression softened. Elena, you've always been the stable one. The smart one. The one with real skills. Mark was ambitious, sure, but you were the one with substance. And maybe now that he's finally in rooms where he feels important, he's rewriting the story to make himself the sole reason he got there. I swallowed hard. She wasn't wrong. But hearing it out loud felt like someone pressing a thumb into a bruise. When I got home, Mark was on the phone. I stopped just inside the door. He didn't notice me. Yeah, I know, he said, pacing the living room. She's been tense. I think she's taking all this too personally. A pause. Then Taylor's voice faintly, he had her on speaker. Mark, people like Elena don't get the pressure we deal with at this level. It's not her fault. She just sees things from a simpler perspective. My jaw clenched so tight it hurt. Simpler perspective. I stayed still, invisible, listening. Mark chuckled softly, a sound that felt like betrayal even though it was quiet. I just don't want her stressing me out before the audit cycle, he said. My chest tightened. Stress him out? The irony made my hands shake. I backed away, careful not to let the floor creak, and slipped quietly toward the bedroom. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the wall. Not crying. Not angry. Just stunned. This version of Mark, the one complaining about me to a woman he admired, was someone I didn't recognize. Someone I wasn't sure I ever really knew. At dinner last night, I'd felt displaced. Now I felt erased. And still, the tension didn't explode. It settled deeper. Like sediment. That night, Mark brought home takeout. He placed the bag on the counter with forced cheer. I figured you'd be buried in your project, so I picked something up. You like the miso salmon from Nico's, right? I looked at him, really looked, and realized something important. He wasn't scared of losing me. He was scared of me becoming inconvenient. Thanks, I said quietly. He smiled, relieved, not understanding that something inside me had shifted another inch. Later, after dinner, he kissed my temple and said, I know you've been stressed. Just remember, I'm under a lot of pressure too. He said it gently, like he believed it. I nodded, but a truth had already begun forming in my mind, quiet but undeniable. I wasn't stressed. I was waking up. And Mark had no idea. The turning point arrived quietly. Not as an explosion, not as a confrontation, but as a soft, almost forgettable moment that hit me with the force of something much larger only after it settled. It happened on a Wednesday morning. Mark had left early again, the smell of his cologne lingering faintly in the hallway. I'd just made coffee when my phone buzzed with an email notification, not from a client, but from someone I hadn't heard from in nearly a year. Subject, quick question, and possibly some work for you. It was from Daniel Rowe. Daniel wasn't a friend. Not exactly. He was a senior analyst at a venture group I'd consulted for 2 years ago. Sharp, respectful, and unusually perceptive, the kind of person who remembered details you didn't think anyone noticed. We produced one of my best reports together before his company reorganized and our collaboration ended. I opened the email. Hi Elena. I'm working with a mid-sized investment firm now, and your name came up during a discussion about third-party analysts. We're reviewing a transportation portfolio, and I remembered your knack for spotting inconsistencies before anyone else does. Would you be open to a call? I stared at the screen. It wasn't the offer. I get inquiries sometimes. Not many since I scaled back, but enough. It was that phrase. Your knack for spotting inconsistencies before anyone else does. I hadn't heard someone say something like that about me in, I didn't know how long. It felt like a hand reaching through fog. I replied before I could overthink it. Yes, I'm available this afternoon. The call lasted 28 minutes. 28 minutes of being spoken to like a colleague. 28 minutes of someone asking genuine questions and actually listening to the answers. 28 minutes of feeling like the version of myself I'd nearly forgotten. When I hung up, my heart was beating faster, not romantically, but professionally. Alert. Engaged. Awake. There was a time when this used to be normal. Now, it felt like remembering oxygen after breathing shallow for too long. I stood in the middle of my living room, phone still in hand, without moving. Something was shifting, slowly and quietly, and I could feel it like a tide pulling at my feet. I wasn't sure if the pull was toward something new, or away from something old. Late that afternoon, Mark texted me. Not a question. Not checking in. Just, Mark, dinner with Taylor and Mason tonight. It's important. I'll be late. My thumb hovered over the keyboard. A month ago, I would have asked, everything okay? Want me to warm something up for you later? Today, I simply wrote, Me, okay. A small word, but the lack of anything extra was the first thread pulling loose. A minute later, he replied, Mark, don't wait up. I didn't. The quiet turning point came that evening, at 7:42 p.m. Not earlier during the call, not when Mark texted me. It arrived wrapped in something so ordinary, I almost missed its meaning. I was sorting through old folders on my laptop, cleaning up outdated reports. I opened a document I hadn't looked at in a long time, a project summary I'd put together for Mark's firm years ago, back when he was climbing the early management ladder. He'd been preparing a pitch deck and feeling overwhelmed. I offered to help him analyze the client's financials. I'd spent 3 evenings building models, checking projections, preparing a detailed breakdown of risks the partners might miss. He used almost all of it. He got the project. He thanked me with takeout and a kiss, and for years afterward he used to joke that I should invoice his firm for half his promotions. I remembered those nights, the excitement, the energy, the feeling that we were a team building something together. I scrolled down through the old document. Then I froze. At the bottom of the summary, in the metadata area I'd never bothered to check before, I saw something I'd never noticed. Last edited by M. Carter. Mark. Not surprising. He used the document in his pitch. But it wasn't the name that got me. It was the timestamp. 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks. Years after the project. Years after he'd stopped asking for my help. Years after he started repeating Taylor's opinions like scripture. Why had he opened my old work 3 weeks ago? Curiosity prickled along my skin. I opened the folder and checked the other files. 4 of them, all from previous projects, all ones he'd used early in his career, had been opened recently. Some just weeks ago. One of them less than 10 days ago. He was using my work again, quietly, without mentioning it, without acknowledging it, while telling others I didn't really work, while laughing about my free time, while letting Taylor call my career adorable. My throat tightened, not from sadness. From recognition. He still relied on me. He still trusted my judgment. He still knew I was sharper than the people he was trying to impress. He just no longer wanted me visible in his world. He wanted my brain, not my presence. The realization settled with a cold, unmistakable clarity. Mark hadn't outgrown me. He wasn't beyond my level. He wasn't outpacing me. He was using me, quietly, selectively, strategically, while building a life that no longer included me as an equal. This wasn't distance. This was extraction. A soft, slow exploitation. And it was the first moment I knew. Something between us had shifted in a way that wasn't going to shift back. Not naturally. Not gently. Not without consequence. I closed the laptop, sat very still, and let the truth settle. A hairline fracture had formed, barely visible, but deep, permanent, and the pressure around it was only beginning to build. The tension didn't arrive like thunder. It seeped in, slow, steady, impossible to ignore once you noticed the waterline on the walls. It started the next morning. Mark came home late the night before, well past midnight. I heard him moving around the kitchen, opening drawers softly, trying not to wake me. I pretended to be asleep, even though my eyes stayed open in the dark. He'd smelled faintly of whiskey and whatever expensive cologne his firm gave out at holiday parties, a scent I used to love, but last night it made my stomach tighten. Now, at 7:18 a.m., he was standing in the doorway of the bedroom fastening his watch. Morning, he said. Morning. How'd the project go yesterday? I glanced at him. He hadn't asked me that in weeks. Maybe months. It went fine, I said. You look tired. I am. He hesitated, like he wanted to say something else. But instead he gave a half-smile that didn't touch his eyes and said, we should go out this weekend. Dinner somewhere nice. We haven't done that in a while. For a moment, I almost softened. Almost. Then he added, Taylor said that new French place downtown is incredible. We should try it. And just like that, the softness evaporated. We'll see, I said. His shoulders stiffened, almost imperceptibly, but there it was. He said slowly, are you mad at me about something? I stared at him. For once, I didn't hide it. Yes. He blinked. About what? There were 100 answers. Last week. Last night. The last 6 months. The versions of me he'd let fade, and the versions of himself he'd let inflate. But I gave him the simplest one. You talk about my work like it's a hobby. And I'm tired of it. He exhaled, long and frustrated. I told you, the comment at the mixer was a joke. It wasn't the first time. Elena, you're taking this too personally. I am a person, Mark. It's personal by default. He rubbed the bridge of his nose like I was a problem he needed to solve. We're under a lot of pressure right now, he said. My whole team is stretched thin. Clients are. Can you stop using we when you're talking about your job? You mean you. His jaw flexed. Fine. I'm under pressure. Is that better? It would be, I said, if you didn't act like I'm an accessory to your stress. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Not anger. Not remorse. Confusion. Confusion that I wasn't defaulting to support mode. Confusion that I wasn't cushioning his ego. Confusion that I'd noticed the shift, and wasn't quietly absorbing it. I need you to be on my side right now, he said carefully. There it was. Not us being on the same side, me being on his. I am on your side, I said softly, but I'm also on mine. He studied me, searching for the version of myself he recognized, the one who didn't push back, the one who filled the gaps and softened the blows. He didn't find her. He left without another word. Later that day, the second fracture formed. Around noon, my phone buzzed. Mark, running late again. Don't wait for me. No apology. No explanation. Just the expectation that I'd understand. That of course I'd adjust. I stared at the message. Something hollow spread in my chest, not anger, not sadness. Recognition. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't stress. This was who we had become. I set the phone down and went back to my work. For maybe the first time in months, the numbers pulled me in completely. I found a pattern in the transportation dataset, subtle, buried under 2 years of quarterly shifts. Fraud wasn't obvious yet, but misreporting definitely was. A quiet satisfaction hummed through me. When I was working, I remembered who I was. I remembered the version of myself that didn't shrink, or explain, or wait for permission to be taken seriously. And maybe that was why the next moment hit so hard. At 6:03 p.m. Mark walked through the door. Earlier than usual. He looked frustrated, tired, defensive, a storm ready to burst. You didn't answer my text, he said. I saw it, I replied. And I didn't feel like responding. He blinked, taken aback. Why are you being like this? Like what? Cold, he said. Distant. You're making everything heavier than it needs to be. A laugh escaped me, not a kind one. You've been distant for months. I'm finally matching your energy. His face tightened. That's not fair. Neither is pretending my career is insignificant. His voice broke just slightly. I need you to give me the benefit of the doubt. I looked at him, really looked. This was a man who once told anyone who'd listen that I was the smartest person he knew. Now he couldn't decide whether I was overreacting or inconvenient. What are you not telling me? I asked quietly. He froze. It was a simple question. A soft question. A door left open. His reaction, the slight widening of his eyes, the way he looked toward the floor before answering, was not soft. He said finally, everything is just complicated right now. Work is complicated. Life is complicated. What about us? I asked. His silence was the answer. A long, slow ache spread across my ribs. One sentence hovered between us, the one neither of us said. We are complicated now. The space between us felt like a widening crack. Not broken yet, but stretched, tense, fragile. I turned away first. Dinner's in the fridge, I said quietly. I didn't look back as I walked to the bedroom. And that was when I understood. We weren't fighting. We weren't exploding. We were drifting, silently, steadily, in opposite directions. And for the first time I wasn't sure he even noticed the distance. The decisive moment didn't come with shouting. It didn't come with names thrown across the room, or slammed doors, or one of those explosive scenes people imagine when they picture the end of a marriage. It came on a quiet Friday evening, in a living room lit only by the soft glow of the lamp near the couch. The kind of lighting we used to consider cozy, back when we still built comfort together. I was sitting at the table reviewing Daniel's firm documents, cross-checking variables across 3 datasets, when I heard Mark's key turn in the lock. He entered fast, too fast, like someone who had rehearsed what he was about to say on the entire drive home. He called, not even taking his shoes off. We need to talk. Now. I closed my laptop slowly. He stopped a few feet away from me, breathing hard, shoulders tense. I talked to Taylor today, he said, like the name should make me flinch. I didn't. And? I said. He swallowed. She thinks you're pulling away from me on purpose. My eyebrows rose. That's what he came home with. And you believe her? I asked. I think you're being influenced by, I don't know, stress, outside pressure, something. A hollow feeling spread in my chest, cold, steady, absolute. Outside pressure, I repeated quietly. That's the explanation? Elena, come on. You've been distant. You barely talk to me. You're withholding things. Like what? Like work. Like your emotions. Like whatever is going on in your head. I stared at him. He genuinely didn't see it. He didn't understand that I hadn't been withholding anything, he'd simply stopped listening long ago. I stood up, calmly pushing my chair back. "Mark," I said softly, "you're not losing me because of work, or stress, or outside pressure. You're losing me because you haven't chosen me in a very long time." His face tightened. "That's not true." "It is," I said. "It's the truest thing in this room." He shook his head, frustrated. "We are fine. We're just going through a rough patch." "A rough patch," I repeated. "That's what you call this?" "Elle, I need you to be patient. Everything is chaotic at the firm. I'm being considered for a major internal promotion, and I can't afford distractions." Distractions? The word cut deeper than anything he'd said before. He closed his eyes like he realized the mistake too late. I nodded slowly. "I see. Elena, you didn't even hesitate," I said quietly. "Your instinct was to position me as something that gets in your way, something that needs to be managed. That's not." I interrupted him gently. "Remember when we used to talk about being partners? Supporting each other's goals? Listening to each other? Building something together?" He didn't answer. "Now," I continued, "when I succeed, you minimize it. When I struggle, you ignore it. When I speak, you correct me. And when I shrink myself to keep the peace, you don't even notice." Mark's face softened with sudden fear. "Elle, please. I didn't know you felt this way. We can fix it. Just tell me what you need." And there it was. The decisive moment. Because for months, years even, that's all I had been doing. Telling him what I needed, only softer, smaller, quieter, hoping he'd hear the parts between the words. I took a slow breath. "Mark, I found something." His eyes flickered. "What do you mean?" "Your files," I said. "Old ones. Ones I created. Ones you've used recently." He stiffened. "I'm not angry," I said. "But I know what it means." "Elena, it means you still trust my mind," I said. "You still rely on my work. You still know I see things you don't." I paused. "But you don't love me with that same respect anymore." He looked like he'd been punched. "Elle, no, that's not, His voice broke. "I love you. You're my wife." "Your wife," I echoed. "But not your equal." He stepped toward me. "That's not true." "It is," I whispered. "And we both know it." The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of every missed moment, every small dismissal, every quiet ache I'd swallowed for years. "Elle," he said suddenly, desperate, "I can change. I swear. Just give me time." "Time," I repeated. "Mark, I gave us years." His expression crumpled. "So that's it?" I didn't raise my voice. I didn't cry. I simply said the one sentence that had been sitting quietly inside me since the night of the dinner. "I can't stay where I'm not seen." He stood still, absolutely still, like the world had frozen around him. "Elena, please." The word "please" used to undo me. Now it felt like a memory. I walked to the bedroom and opened the closet. The suitcase I'd bought weeks ago was still tucked inside, and used but waiting. I pulled it out and placed it on the bed. "Don't," he whispered from the doorway. But he didn't move. He didn't reach for me. He didn't fight. He didn't argue. He just watched. And that, more than anything, told me everything I needed to know. By the time I zipped the suitcase, he was crying quietly, hands clasped together like he was holding on to the last pieces of something slipping through his fingers. "Elle, don't go. We can fix it." I looked at him, really looked, and realized something with painful clarity. He wanted the marriage back. He just didn't want me back. Not the version of me who had rediscovered her strength. Not the version who no longer fit into the shrinking space he'd assigned me. "I hope," I said softly, "that one day you understand why I couldn't stay." His face fell. "And I hope," I added, "you learn to treat the next person with the respect you forgot to give me." I lifted the suitcase, walked past him, opened the door. "Goodbye, Mark." He whispered my name, soft, broken, but I didn't turn around. The moment I stepped into the hallway, something inside me settled. Not peace, not relief, something stronger. Certainty. The marriage wasn't ending in anger. It was ending in clarity. The door closed behind me with a quiet click, a sound so soft, yet so final, it felt like the closing of an entire chapter of my life. And for the first time in a long time, I felt free.